Some of the hippies had that mentality also. They wanted legalization. And we knew what that meant. Legalization means control. And so not all of us supported that. And, but they kept it up, they kept it up, they kept it up. And more people started going for it. And finally it was put on the ballot in '96. And one of the aspects of the legalization bill was that people who had been arrested and were in prison for small amounts of possession of marijuana would be released. So I voted for that bill so that those men and women could be released. And I've wrestled with that decision ever since. Not that my vote would have made that much of a difference, but legalization has been the first marijuana was the boon. Now it became the bane of our culture here, and actually before the first form of legalization was the medical marijuana, and that was in the form of the 215, the Compassionate Marijuana Act, or whatever it was called. And that allowed us some room to grow black market because there were no permits involved. It was just you were allowed a certain amount of square feet. And but then, you know, it evolved. The permits became involved, and then things became more and more controlled. And then with the full legalization, it really clamped down and became a commodity. And I realized a distinction that I still hold today, that cannabis, which is the term that identifies the products of the legalization, cannabis is a term for a commodity, like wheat, corn, barley, commodities, pork bellies, commodities, things that are bought and sold on the stock market, like cannabis is now. Marijuana is a sacred herb, will always be a sacred herb. On every continent, it's known. It traveled in the ships or however it traveled, birds, seeds, however it traveled, it grows on every continent in the world. So then, actually marijuana became both a sacred herb and a commodity at the same time. Now, that was a fork in the road, and the paths diverged. But one of the results of the cannabis, the legalization in the cannabis, was that people started coming here not to live the lifestyle that we created and manifested here. That was one of peace and love. It wasn't even necessarily of marijuana. There were people here, there were hippies or kind, peaceful people who came here to be free in the practice of their religions and their forms of spirituality, to practice their crafts, to practice their trades, etc. But with the commodification of cannabis came what came to be known as the Green Rush in the late 90s, mid and late 90s. And that was young people, primarily in their early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, from all over the country who decided to move here and make the money that they could by wholesaling it themselves. These are some of the same people that used to come here and buy hundreds of pounds, tens of pounds, you know, probably thousands of pounds. No way of knowing how many pounds left here every week. There were people from all over the world that came here to buy and to work. And but at any rate, these young people started coming here just to make money. And they drove big trucks. The young people around here all of a sudden started buying big trucks because they could make big money. I remember my daughter telling me about how it was a game that the guys would play to see who could get their brand new truck the dirtiest, or the most, who could roll their truck and without hurting themselves. You know, just things that people do when you give people who are stupid too much money. So part of this green rush, I ended up meeting some younger people, and some of them as trimmers, some of them looking for other kinds of work, cultivating, etc. By that time, I was getting a little bit older, wanted to move into town myself. Actually, I had inherited money, a modest amount of money from my parents, and instead of buying more land in the hills, which I knew my daughter didn't want, I bought a lot in Redway and built a house in Redway. Hired a close friend of mine who was a contractor, and I did the labor work. And we built a beautiful small house. I couldn't afford a whole lot, but it was a house in Redway. And so consequently, I lived for a couple of years trying to grow a crop in Fire Creek and also take care of a house in Redway. And that started to get a little old. I was in my car more time than I was in my homes, probably. At the same time, there was a young guy who had come out to Fire Creek and looking for work, and we had become friends. And so I decided to ask him if he wanted to help me out. And he became a partner of mine, and took over my grow in Fire Creek. Well, little did I know that his attitude toward it was completely different than mine. So without asking me, he did a whole lot of excavation, completely altered and modified my garden areas, which were homegrown, down-to-earth, just beds that could grow vegetables just as easily as marijuana. And all of a sudden I had a new road, new driveway in my backyard, and 4 flat plots for greenhouses, and not a whole lot I could do about it except try and rationalize it and look forward to being able to save a little money, because I'd be making a little more than I had in the past. That had not been my focus. So, but that changed everything and fit right in with the commodification. So since then, the markets have changed.